Hello F1 fans! Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, here with myself, David and Vasco, and in this episode we're going to discuss the 2024 F1 Australian Grand Prix. We're gonna start with practice.
Well, for practice, we can say Lando Norris took the first practice session. After that, Charles Leclerc took the next two practice sessions, and Ferrari especially looked very sharp, in my opinion. But after that, during the qualifying session, we didn't really saw that. But the next thing is Albon's heavy crash and consequent decision from Williams to put him in Logan Sargent's car, which was very controversial in my opinion, because that's a mistake that Alex Albon did, and I think he should get the consequences.
I think that the team were just trying to, even though they only had one car, they believed that with Alex Albon they would have the best chance at points. And in the end, he didn't get any points, but he was very close. He finished in P11. And I think if Logan Sargent was in that car for the rest of the weekend, what could you really take away from the weekend?
Yeah, for sure. They wanted to maximize because they don't have a lot of opportunities. They won't have a lot of opportunities, I think, throughout the season. But I still think it's a bit unfair to Logan because that wasn't his mistake and he was put on the sidelines for the rest of the weekend. But it is what it is. Let's move to the qualifying session.
Yeah, qualifying, as Vasco mentioned, Ferrari looked really promising in practice, so there were high expectations. But in Q1, we saw Daniel Ricciardo had a deleted lap and he got eliminated in his home Grand Prix. Zhou Guanyu had a very weird, I don't even know if I can call it an incident, but his wing broke very randomly. Esteban Ocon celebrated Q2 as if he won the race. Lewis Hamilton got eliminated in Q2, which was quite surprising. And we turn up to Q3, Max Verstappen clears everyone by almost 3/10. Carlos Sainz on the front row of the grid. And Sergio Perez got a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Nico Hülkenberg, if I'm not mistaken. And he dropped from P3 to P6. But it was still a pretty interesting grid. And now we can move on to the race.
So the podium finishers of the race were as follows. In third place we had Lando Norris, in second we had Charles Leclerc, and in first place we had Carlos Sainz, a Ferrari 1-2. And the DNFs were Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, even though I think he was classified, still he DNF. We can begin with the opening lap.
Well, it was very clean opening lap and great start from Verstappen, great start from Sainz. But unfortunately, there was a problem with Max Verstappen's car, and I think that was bad only for Red Bull fans, and all the other fans of the motorsport were celebrating because they were finally able to see a different winner, to hear different anthems at the end of the race. But still, I'm a bit disappointed, but things like that happen, and for a very extended period of time, Max Verstappen did not have any issues. He wasn't sidelined during a race, so I think that is not going to affect his season so much. But still, very strange incident for what we see usually from Red Bull.
We saw some of the parts of the car really just breaking off and almost like explosions, mini explosions from the car as he was entering the pits. It was quite unusual, I must say. Like his brake really just burned up like the entire right rear part of the car. And it was quite an odd situation. We had really never seen Max Verstappen retire this early in a race for, I don't even know, like maybe 5 years or something. Since Silverstone 2021, he has not really retired like this early in a race. Going into the unknown now, all of a sudden, we have Ferrari and McLaren at the front, Carlos Sainz leading the race. But as we went through the race, we had another mechanical failure, and that was for Lewis Hamilton, who had some kind of engine failure. And what a disappointing start to the season for him. He mentioned this week that it is his worst start to a season, and I might have to agree. Do you guys think that maybe he's just moved on with Mercedes and he's just waiting for Ferrari next season? Or what is going on with Lewis? He wasn't impressive all weekend.
I can see it's potentially like that because it seems like he doesn't care that much about his performance at Mercedes, and even though during this race it was not his fault, it was the engine, still compared to George Russell he doesn't perform that well, and I am really concerned with what this season is going to bring for Mercedes.
I think the right word for Mercedes season so far is a bit underwhelming, because before the start of the season, we expected a lot of different things for them. And right now, we only see, the first two races were alright for George Russell and they were poor for Hamilton. And Australia was like the pinnacle of these performances. And overall, it wasn't a great weekend for them. And I think, although there are a lot of races till the end of the season, I don't think that Mercedes, the whole team, and their two pilots are motivated enough for the team to have great results till the end of the season. And I think Lewis Hamilton is waiting for his move to Ferrari in the next season, and the rest of the Mercedes crew are probably waiting for 2026 to come.
Speaking of Ferrari actually were having a great race, and at the start of the race, it was almost a checkerboard pattern between Ferrari, McLaren at the front. We saw Charles Leclerc get ahead of Lando Norris thanks to the pit stops, and I would personally say bad strategy from McLaren. I think they should have covered Charles instantly. They left Lando out for way too many laps, and Charles jumped Lando, and it became a Ferrari 1-2, and Ferrari really never looked back after that. They controlled the race, especially Carlos Sainz at the front, and Charles Leclerc was never really under threat from Lando. So how would you guys evaluate McLaren's performance? Because I thought it was impressive that they were sticking with the Ferrari's pace, which is something they hadn't done so far this season, but I feel like it was a missed opportunity for them with no Max Verstappen in the race to challenge for the win.
I don't really think that they had the pace to keep up with Ferrari, but I think they could have capitalized better on this race, especially with the strategic calls, because there were some strange decisions, and although they took third and fourth, and I think they would be super pleased with it, I don't really think that they could have done more, but they could have at least tried. And I want to mention something which was a bit strange to me, but the overall performance throughout this weekend of Checo Perez again wasn't really impressive, and I think that is what we were talking about. Yeah, Max Verstappen won't have a lot of weekends that he'll be off, he'll have some problems with the car or whatever, but when there are races like that, even if there are like 2, 3 or 4 per season, I think the second driver in Red Bull should capitalize on that, the way, for example, Valtteri Bottas managed to get some races during his time at Mercedes, and Checo Perez simply cannot do that. Yes, in the previous 2 weeks he was close to Verstappen, he got great results, but this weekend, when Verstappen had problem with the car, he was not even on the podium, and I think that is what, in the end of the season, is going to decide what is going to be the future for Checo Perez.
I absolutely agree, and I'm not sure if he's going to keep his seat, to be honest. And moving down the order, we have to mention that Yuki Tsunoda and both Haas's were in the points after that George Russell incident. We're going to discuss it. But Yuki Tsunoda had a really, really solid weekend. He was, again, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. Do you think, guys, that Ricciardo should be dropped soon?
No, it's too early. I mean, what has he had? Like, he's had 3 races? Like, I don't even know. Nick De Vries got half the season. Like, why should Daniel Ricciardo be dropped after 3 races? I mean, I said this last season, but Liam Lawson deserved this seat more. And they are facing the consequences of their actions right now, because Daniel Ricciardo realistically is past his prime and is not what he once was. And I've heard rumors that considering dropping him as early as within the next 2 races, I would say that is very early. Let him have more races, more opportunities, and see what he does from there. Yuki Tsunoda has been driving this car for, what is this, his 4th season? His 4th season at this team. So he has more experience with this car. So it should not come as a surprise that he is starting the season off better.
I also don't think that RB should drop Ricciardo, because he hasn't really done anything positive, but he hasn't really done anything that negative so far. So I think they should keep him at least till the end of the season, and after that decide what is going to happen, because we have seen that a lot of times with Red Bull, and I don't really think that if they demote a driver, there is going to be any positive consequence. But let's move on to one of the last laps of the race, and Fernando Alonso, who had penalty after the end of the race because of a collision
No, not because of brake testing.
Yeah, because of that. But it was a really odd accident, and I don't think Fernando should have been penalized for that.
I agree. I also don't see why they should penalize him. I watched the incident quite a few times, and I think that it was George Russell's mistake. It was not Alonso to blame. And I mean, George has done this like Singapore last year. He did a similar thing in the last lap. He made a huge mistake and just compromised his whole race. And I think that Alonso's penalty was very unfair.
Yeah, at the time, I didn't even consider a penalty with Alonso. I just thought that George Russell just lost it on his own. And after reviewing it, I can see why the FIA penalized him. He did go slower in that corner than what he normally did. But I still don't think it was the reason George Russell crashed. And I thought 20 seconds, especially for no contact. Like, there was no contact. Why is that 20 seconds? I thought that was a bit absurd. He deserved that 6th place that he got. He actually drove a pretty decent race considering the car's performance. But yeah, he did get a penalty and dropped to 8th. As for George Russell, I mean, disappointing must be said. I mean, yeah, it wasn't the greatest position. Like, he was running in 7th, fighting for 6th. I mean, the Mercedes is pretty slow to begin with, but another just clumsy mistake from George Russell, which is something that we saw quite a lot of from him last season. And he started the season actually pretty decently, so it was pretty disappointing to see him just go off like that in the last lap.
Well, I think we can move on, but I just want to mention something. Lance Stroll was 6th, which is impressive for his standards. So I just wanted to mention this because I'm not sure that till the end of the season, if there is no crazy chaotic race, I don't think he'll be close to that position again. So just wanted to mention. Shout out to my boy Lance Stroll.
We also asked the question now with Ferrari getting a huge chunk of points. They're only 4 points behind Red Bull in the constructors. Charles Leclerc only 4 points behind Max Verstappen. 11 points covered the top 4. Could you guys see a championship battle here?
I don't really see championship battle because if it was purely on pace, if there was a ranking on that, well, okay, and with these small differences in the points, okay, but Verstappen for 2 races is in front of everybody who has taken part in 3 races, apart from Carlos Sainz, of course, who had an appendix operation. But purely on pace, I simply don't see it, and I think Verstappen will be hungry for wins after that DNF, and in the next 3-4 races, he'll manage to get a lot of advantage in points-wise, of course. And I don't really see a battle for the championship. Just Ferrari are too far away from Red Bull.
I remain optimistic about the battle. Maybe until like a certain point of the season there is going to be one. Hopefully for us fans it's going to be better if there is one. So we'll see. And now we can move on to the fun rubric and start with the highlight of the weekend. For me, this was the non-Red Bull win because honestly I didn't expect this to happen before the weekend started. And I'm pretty satisfied with that.
Well, I have the same highlight of the weekend because that don't really happen often. And Max Verstappen DNF is something to talk about for sure.
My highlight of the weekend is Carlos Sainz because he's so good. Like, wow. I mean, what a performance. He just crushed that entire race, started on the front row. And I think this is a new Carlos Sainz. Ever since he didn't get his Ferrari contract renewed, he is a changed man. He seems hungrier than ever to prove his worth. And I think that, in a way, not getting that Ferrari seat has motivated him to perform to the highest level. And he's being rumored now for some of the best seats in F1, you know, the Red Bull seat, the Mercedes seat. And I just think that he is the most informed driver at the moment. Of course, Max Verstappen's still the best, but what Carlos Sainz is doing, he had an appendix surgery and he goes on to win the very next race. I mean, it's just so impressive, I must say, and I have to give props because he deserves it and he's been better than Charles Leclerc this season.
I absolutely agree, and I can say that before the start of the season, I was the only one who believed in Carlos Sainz, so shout out to me. Let's move to the surprise and disappointments of the weekend, and I can start from mine. My surprise of the weekend was Yuki Tsunoda because of the great pace he showed during the qualifying session, and he knocked out Hamilton. And after that, he had a very steady race, and he managed to capitalize on the poor performances and DNS and so on and so on. and he took 7th place, 6 points, which is a lot, really a lot for his team. So Yuki Tsunoda, really good weekend for him.
Yeah, he definitely maximized on the fact that no Verstappen and no Mercedes in the points. Another team that maximized their result was Haas. Double points? When was the last time Haas had double points? I honestly can't remember.
I think it was Austria 2022 with Mick Schumacher and Magnussen.
Oh my goodness, that is
That
such
was a long time ago.
long time ago. But yeah, great race for Haas. Actually showing good race pace. Saw Kevin Magnussen make a move on Alex Albon, which turned out to be the move for the last point. So it was a pretty important result for Haas, I would say. And they're honestly having a not so bad season.
For me, the surprise is Carlos Sainz. For you, he was the highlight. But for me, I didn't expect him to perform at such a high level after an appendix surgery. I mean, who would have expected this? He was just flawless. When he took first place, after that, nobody could reach him, could catch him. I mean, he was just amazing.
Yes, his teammate was far away from him, I can say. Although he was only 2.5 seconds away, 2.4.
He caught
actually.
He caught up to him.
Yeah, he caught up to him, but there was not a single point throughout the race where I thought, oh yeah, Carlos can lose this. And he won it actually pretty easily. And moving on to my disappointment of the weekend, and I can summarize it as the disappointment of the season. And that is Alpine. The way Esteban Ocon celebrated getting in Q2 for me was a bit hilarious, because Alpine, and let's start from Renault. From their project, we expected a lot of things. We expected great pilots, we expected great cars every season, and somebody who can challenge the big three. Actually, we see very disappointing project, and this weekend, after 3 DNFs, they were left 16 and 13. So them combined with Stake Team, I think they are the disappointments of the season so far, and I honestly think it is really disappointing for the whole association regarding Alpine, and I don't think anything will change throughout the next season. So there will be essentially 2 years of agony for a team that had so big potential when they entered the sport, and they said, yeah, we want to be part of F1 and we want to be a team that other people consider as a strong opponent.
I would agree with that assessment of Alpine's season so far. In terms of this weekend, I would have to say that Mercedes had an awful weekend and were extremely disappointing. It is their first double DNF since 2018, which is quite crazy when you think about it. Lewis Hamilton was absolutely nowhere the whole weekend, didn't make it into Q3, and in the race, he did retire with an engine failure, but he wasn't really that high up the order anyways. And George Russell, he was okay, but once again, as we already mentioned, he kind of threw it all away on the last lap into the wall. And that kind of summarizes Mercedes' season. I feel like ever since Lewis signed that Ferrari contract, there's just been this disconnect between the whole team. He doesn't look like he's into it. Toto Wolff looks like he's miserable. And George Russell, he's just kind of there. He's just driving what he can, but no one seems really passionate about what's going on. It's just such a depressing scene, and I just don't see them really progressing actually that much, even though I could see their development for sure. They have like the resources, but just I think there's such a disconnect between everyone in that team that it's just getting worse and worse as the season's going on, and this was really the climax of it almost.
I won't add anything as the pain is big enough for me right now. I will just move on to the predictions and say that the predictions we made for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the only one who got a point was myself because of my prediction for Hülkenberg getting points. And my predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix are the following. McLaren, at least one of them will be on the podium again, and both Williams will reach Q2.
Well, my predictions are redemption day for Max Verstappen, and I think he'll get a Grand Slam in Suzuka. And the other thing is DNF for one of the Ferrari cars. I'm not sure how it is going to happen. Is it going to be like a problem with the car or collision? But I just feel like it.
My predictions are that there will be a new team in the points. So one of the three teams that haven't scored points will get in there. Those are Alpine, Stake, and Williams, I believe. And the other prediction is that Ferrari take the lead in the constructors. I know it's quite ambitious, and this is not like because, I expect now Ferrari to like be beating Max Verstappen constantly. I actually think Sergio Perez will be such a detriment to Red Bull that Ferrari with their two cars will gain enough points rather than Red Bull, who will only have one car at the front, is the way I imagine it, and that's why I think Ferrari actually have a chance to take the constructors.
I think it is going to be interesting in Suzuka for sure, but this is all for today from us, guys. We're looking forward to the next episode. Until then, like, subscribe and follow us in AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
If you no longer go for a gap that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.